Envision this briefly. You're caught underground, isolated, in obscurity, sucking on cavern rocks. For quite a long time, at once out a solitary drop of clean water from the stones in the cavern you ended up in your body is squandered, and you become visually impaired as you haven't seen any light. In more than 3 weeks, the main organization left are your contemplations as you consider distressingly your loved ones, with the one inquiry going through your head: am I going to kick the bucket here? This was the truth for experienced cave jumper Peter Verhel. September 29, 1984, when a normal cavern jumping campaign transformed into a horrible "this is the terrible story of the Sterkfontein caves" occurrence. To comprehend Peter, we should go over what initially inspired his investigation. Sterkfontein caves is a monstrous assortment of interconnected caves concealed under the South African V. Its immeasurability and mind-boggling plan are sufficient to make even the most experienced pilgrim shiver with a sound portion of dread. The Sterkfontein framework is more than 3.7 mi in all-out length, with its passages winding further than 131 ft into the earth. Consider it an underground city with loads the size of church buildings and passages sufficiently tight to make you creep. They branch and splinter like brakes, wandering aimlessly at apparently irregular points. You could track down self in a labyrinth of interconnected burrows, each apparently indistinguishable, each holding the possibility to lead you further into the dim, obscure. Peter Verhel lived for the excitement of the jump, however, an accomplished cavern pilgrim he was portrayed by companions as a thrill-seeker, continuously stretching the boundaries. So whenever the opportunity came to be essential for the group planning the deceptive Milner corridor chamber, Peter bounced at it. The 3 jumpers, Peter, Johan van der Aal, and Johan von Sbargen, arranged their journey cautiously, with just enough oxygen for 1 hour and a solitary headlamp for every one of them. They would depend on a rule to explore the dark cavern framework. Their objective was to follow the line to the furthest limit of the chamber and back in no less than an hour. The plunge started at late morning, with every jumper having vowed to keep the rules steadfastly, a commitment Peter would, over and over, break in the past. At the back of the gathering, Peter attempted to check his fretful energy as they plunged into the cavern. He knew the risks of straying all alone. However, Peter Verhel's temperament as a thrill-seeker and his presumptuousness started to grab hold as they wandered further into the core of the Sterkfontein caves. The Milner lobby chamber's charm was overwhelming for Peter. The weak light emission lone front lamp cast shadows on the cavern's walls, making a strained air. The primary difficult situations would start with Peter's crazy choices at this beginning phase of their EXP campaign. Around 20 minutes into their jump, disregarding the guideline relentless presence, he drifted off to investigate aside to the right entry, a dull hole that intrigued him. Uninformed about his deviation, his mates proceeded with their cautious investigation of the chamber, confiding in their rules. They soon anyway understood that Peter was absent and turned round to look for his front light. Yet again. Fortunately, he returned a moment later, subsequent to entering the cavern without the rule profound with. In the cavern framework, Peter's second bough of wildness unfurled, unfit to oppose the charm of another neglected entry. He split away from the security of the rule, vanishing into a passage to one side. At the time, Vault and enthusiasm went on into the cavern burrow for around 10 ft more. By chance, Walt thought back and saw Peter was not again on the line. He trusted that Peter will get back to the first cavern burrow. Trusting he wasn't sufficiently silly to investigate the unknown caverns without a rule again, Peter rose up out of the break, having found nothing of revenue. Walt would later proceed to say that he motioned to Peter to avoid that again, as they were both mindful of how effectively they could lose all sense of direction in there. Figuring Peter wouldn't rehash this mix-up, they pushed on keeping the rules, and Johan and Peter, to observe him, it was turning out to be progressively evident that still up in the air to investigate the strange cavern frameworks on his own, maybe in a bid to really establish himself. Maybe his watchfulness nature would lead him to take the pivotal third turn that would bring about the horrendous occasions that occur next. Volan energy came the rule respecting the magnificence of the Milner corridor. Peter swam at the back through the completely dark waters, and the limited opening in the cavern wall got his attention. He shone his headlamp shaft inside, enlightening a little side passage fanning out from the principal chamber. Peter felt the recognizable tingle of interest and crave. Revelation. Where did this secret section lead? What obscure fossils or developments could it contain? He realized he ought to turn around and attempt to reconnect with the others. The bait of a strange area demonstrated areas of strength for two himself, that he could rapidly investigate the passage. Regardless, return in time. Peter swam inside. As he dug further into the side passage, the underground world turned into a complicated maze of winding entries wandering aimlessly in a confounding way. That once encouraging excursion immediately changed into an evening. Marish experienced the shortfall of recognizable milestones and the shortfall of any reasonable ability to know east from west. Left Peter muddled and powerless in the midst of the befuddling entries. Peter lost all sense the primary passage and the rule that had recently directed him securely through. The sinkhole's frenzy and dread began to sneak in as he understood the weightiness of his circumstance. The walls appeared to surround him, and each turn he took just developed his feeling of claustrophobia. As the minutes ticked by, Peter became progressively frantic to track down his direction. Back to the principal chamber, his oxygen supply nearly being unfilled in his criticalness. He wandered down many passages, as of now not certain which bearing he had come from. The light emission headlamp cut through the dim water, unproductively looking for a natural milestone or the aid rope that could prompt salvation. In his excited state, Peter didn't actually consider turning around. He resembled a confined creature, focused on break-winding holes and forks, obscured together till he was entirely lost in the submerged maze. When his watch beat the 10-minute admonition, Peter felt genuine frenzy set in. With scarcely any oxygen left, he climbed toward a weak gleam over the surface, getting through into a confined air poet. Peter wheezed for breath. He wound up caught on a little rough island and encircled by water on all sides. It was basically impossible that forward or move. In despair, Peter acknowledged he probably staggered indiscriminately into an impasse burrow that prompted this island. Maybe in his oxygen-denied disarray, he had confused the light sparkle with an exit plan and followed it into this deadly snare. Depleted and developing hypothermic, Peter stuck to the shallow stone edge. His spotlight batteries were passing on, quick lowering him in entering haziness, rapidly understanding that he was in a very hazardous circumstance. His main expectation was that his companions would get on his vanishing and start the quest for him. What he didn't realize, he was straightforwardly a needle and a feed stack. Maybe in the event that he comprehended the circumstance he would be in, he would have faced the challenge of suffocating, looking for an exit plan. As Vault and enthusiasm arrived at the finish of the principal H chamber, they stopped to trust that Peter will get up to speed. However, just void obscurity followed behind them. Confounded, they backtracked along the aid snags, flagging their lights into the murkiness, yet no reaction accompanied developing disquiet. They scoured the cavern framework to the extent that their tie permitted, projecting their solitary headlamp pillar into each cleft and passage, frantically wanting to find their missing sidekick. Yet the cavern water gobbled up their lights, giving no hint of Peter. With their watches showing just minutes left before their air ran and fear sank over them, they had no real option except to begin back for the surface, abandoning one of their own. The return swim was painful, each fiber in their bodies willing them to turn around and continue to look through. The gamble was too extraordinary. Breaking into the sunlight again, the pair detached their stuff and sat heaving on the rough bank. A post-op interview with the ground group affirmed their most terrible trepidation. Peter was gone. They argued to quickly re-emerge the cavern, to find him demanding Peter may, as yet, be bursting at the seams with the crisis tank he conveyed. However, the missing rule made a recharge search unimaginable. Squashed with responsibility, greenish blue and three-step dance could join the salvage endeavors and ask it wasn't past the point of no return. A pursuit group of more than 100 individuals was gathered rapidly, as it was an attempt to beat the odds to save Peter. As to them, they knew nothing about any pockets of air underground, on the off chance that enthusiasm and Walt had run out of air. He would no doubt confront similar circumstance throughout the next few hours. Innumerable jumpers into the dark profundities of the northern passages yielded no indication of Peter or the section where he had vanished. However, his companions looked through each break in chamber toward the north. They found no hint of him still. Since his body was not found, his companions thought for even a moment to trust that someplace in the dinky southern profundities he had figured out how to make do. However, they got a handle on the calamity that had fallen upon Peter on his pivotal excursion. The gathering had no clue about that. The circumstance was soon to adjust in a considerably hazier course, prompting results none might have anticipated at them. Starting the mad quest for Peter occurred in the cavern burrows around him. Alone in the 12 p.m. darkness, Peter constrained down the frenzy ascending in his chest. He needed to keep a composed mind in the event that he planned to get himself away from this submerged labyrinth. Drawing on his times of jumping experience, he attempted to get his orientation. Which turns had he taken since losing the aid? Peter shut his eyes, envisioning the cavern design from memory. In the event that his psychological guide was correct, he ought to have the option to switch his way back to the principal chamber he needed to attempt once more with. Under 10 minutes of oxygen remaining, he dove into the water again, kicking gradually to ration air. Peter explored the trap of passages. However, the geology appeared to be changed. Now each turn, new silt, worked up by his blades, darkened the far ahead and mercurial mists. He counseled his plunging 7 minutes of air, left perhaps sufficient time. Peter pushed forward, paying attention to his gut feelings to lead him out. When he surfaced in one more confined impasse, Peter acknowledged he was just squandering valuable air. He stopped and controlled his breathing to make his stockpile last. Yet his contemplations wandered to Shirl, his better half and mother. Whether he'd make it home to them, their countenances secured him. However, trust was blurring. He continued looking for an exit plan. He dove into another passage, imploring one would open into the excellent primary chamber, and sunshine past it. Yet rather he re-emerged back into the first little island. He had found decreasing oxygen constrained Peter to stand up to the cruel truth. The Sterkfontein maze had fixed him in his main expectation. Currently was to sit tight for salvage. With scarcely any food, he confronted an overwhelming reality. He could either attempt another break endeavor or remain there and, in a real sense, starve to death. Tired him enormously. He needed to rest in any event. For a couple of moments he lay his head on the rocks and floated off to rest, trusting assistance would be on its way. When he stirred anyway, his rest transformed into a ceaseless dream. As days extended into weeks, trust decreased. Not a solitary sign arose, regardless of efficiently gritting the maze of passages. Peter had evaporated without a following 6 of every 1 days. Anguishing weeks and unwavering cavern frameworks coincidentally found a terrible disclosure. After separating a cavern wall, Peter's body lay starved and dead in a little cavern, only 118 feet from the fundamental section and only 90 feet away from where the heroes had looked through. In those frantic hours, Peter had scratched a shocking last message in the mud, with death blooming, "I love you, Mama and Cher." It was a painful finish to his weeks-long battle. To endure it appeared Peter had proportioned his meager air supply to the final gasp, getting himself valuable time, yet unfit to find an exit plan. He eventually capitulated to the virus yearning and fatigue. After what is assessed to be 3 weeks, the group delicately recuperated Peter's remaining parts, bringing him back through the very winding entries that had turned into his burial chamber. However, the gigantic flood had finished in misfortune. Peter's adoration for his family shone like a guide through the obscurity. His courageous soul persevered inside the walls that had compelled yet never broken him anyway. Not all accounts have such a bleak completion. The Frenzy in Fields Cave episode story has unexpected developments that not even most experienced cave travelers would hope to happen. See you there.